Hey, man, fire away. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
It's time!
It's time.
It is time for
The most electrifying move!
All right, scumbag, pay attention. It's time for mail call.
You've Got Mail.
You've got mail. Yes, we do. Man, that gets me hype. I ain't gonna lie to you.
Listen, man, promo and production skills are just, see, that's K-Dot level right there is what that is.
All right, Pat, let's go to Twitter. Our guy Gosu on Twitter, he has a couple questions. We'll start with the fairly easy one to me. Question 1, which group is worst? The running back room or the defensive line room?
Man, that is a fantastic question because both rooms need to prove themselves in a very big way in Oxnard training camp this year. That being said, you're more deficient of bodies and talent at the defensive line as far as the interior of the defensive line is concerned. I mean, you can even look at the ends and talk about depth because you lost Dante Fowler and you lost Dorrance Armstrong. Both followed Dan Quinn to the Washington Commanders. You have Sam Williams there, but you need him to step up in a major way, have a breakout year in year 3. So there's a question mark there. Not on ability, but it just simply will he do it. You got to figure out if Junior Fehoko is going to be able to contribute this year. He did not contribute last year as a rookie. 4th-round pick. Osa Odigizua is going to be Osa Odigizua. Mozzie Smith, obviously the headline situation there as he tries to put weight back on for Mike Zimmer and what Mike Zimmer wants him to be, which is that definitive one-tech that he was at Michigan, which is exactly what Zimmer said. But behind them, I mean, is Chauncey Golston going to have a breakout year in a contract year? You don't know. Question mark there. And the list goes on and on as far as trying to figure some things out. You got Justin Rogers, who you brought in the NFL draft. I like what he brings to the table. However, he is a late-round pick, so there's going to be quite an uphill battle for him to go from being a late-round pick to challenging Mozzie Smith. At best, he can challenge Chauncey Golston when Golston is not doing those, 1 and 2 tech roles. But too many questions on the defensive line that far outweigh what you got going on in the running back room. At least in the running back room, even if you don't necessarily like the setup, you can't say you don't have enough there where it makes you feel at least okay going to the training camp trying to figure out who can beat out who. And then if it doesn't work out, then you could probably make a trade, or maybe you could sign one of these UFL running backs since the Cowboys are swimming in that pool. But between Zeke and Rico leading the charge, Hunter Lipke, you got to figure out what you're doing with Deuce Vaughn. Snoop Connor, Royce Freeman was an addition. Nathaniel Pete, undrafted free agent out of Missouri. So you have a ton. Malik Davis, obviously, let me not forget him. You have a ton of bodies. I mean, counting Hunter Lipke, you have 8. Yeah. 8 backs. If you look at the defensive line room, how many interior defensive linemen do you have that, as we have this conversation, you feel can actually impact the game? So I'm going to go with defensive line.
That is so interesting because if you look at Micah and D-Law, you say, hey, Micah, D-Law, and then you look at the running back room, I think defensive line, because you got an all-pro and you got, in my opinion, he was a Pro Bowl player last year, and he's still playing at a high level. But the problem is it tails off after that, right? You look at the defensive tackle room, just like you said, it's not only unproven, it's extremely thin, razor thin. And then behind Micah and D-Law, there are question marks. We talked about this the other day, Pat, when we looked at the edge room. Yes, I love the prospects of Marshawn Leland. We know that the talent is there for Sam Williams, but we have to wait and see with Marshawn. And then obviously Sam, who was in the doghouse, it felt like last year a little bit. Can he be the de facto 6th man and do it consistently week in and week out? So there's a ton of question marks outside of your top 2 guys. And that's why this is interesting, because you still got 2 top guys. Where in the running back room, I don't know if you got that. I feel like there's question marks from top to bottom as opposed to bottom per se for the D-line room, if that makes sense.
It does, and it's interesting because, like you said, and to be clear, the running back room does not have what the defensive line room has as far as like Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. You don't have that. You don't have a perennial first-team All-Pro, and as we have this conversation, a perennial front-runner for Defensive Player of the Year and a perennial Pro Bowler in DeMarcus Lawrence. Like, you don't have that caliber of player in the running back room, because I think the Pro Bowl years are behind Ezekiel Elliott. Rico Dowdle's not, sniffed the Pro Bowl. He has the ability, but he's just not been able to piece it together. That also goes to the rep splits and everything. But you can make all these conversations about, why this or why that or why not this, why not that. Bottom line is the defensive line room only has those two aces, and then what do you have after that? Versus the running back room, who has no aces, but, you got like 8, 10. Right? And so as far as cards are concerned, so it's like, you have to wonder. And here's what also proves my point. If the Cowboys were so confident, or so much more confident in the defensive line room than the running backs room, as they're working out and signing you sign a linebacker, you sign a cornerback in Conley, you haven't even worked out, as we have this conversation still, a running back.
Yeah.
However, per Tom Pelissero, and I can confirm this is true, Jonathan Garvin, right? As you mentioned, defensive end, UFL champion, Birmingham Stallions. They're working out a defensive lineman, but not a running back. So I think that goes to the point. They understand that behind Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence, and I love what Marshawn Nealon brings to the table, and I feel like he's going to be an impact player as early as maybe the middle of year one. However, he's still a rookie, has the learning curve, and traditionally, now obviously there are exceptions to the rule, but traditionally you're going to have to give a defensive lineman a couple of years before they really start wrecking shop.
No, that's all fair, and that's why it's a great question, and maybe we'll get some more answers as we move forward, because you talk about the guys that they aren't signing. You mentioned running backs. I'm surprised they are not signing or working out a defensive tackle. That still baffles me, and I know it's a bunch of time, Pat, but that one there, it just has my head exploding.
Yeah, and I understand that 100%, and I think they first want to see, what Mozzie Smith and what the Mozzie Smith-Justin Rogers combo looks like in training camp. So a lot of this is kind of play it by ear, because if you think about it, there are guys like, and I put this name out there weeks ago, Linval Joseph, for example, who has a direct connection to guys like Eric Hendricks and Mike Zimmer. Those types of guys are mercenaries who want nothing to do with off-season program. Nothing. Okay? I really wish that they had looked at Calais Campbell, who is now, with the Miami Dolphins. So Campbell is off the board, but Joseph is still very much on the board, and I think that he's still very much in play. But I think first they want to see what happens in camp with the defensive tackle position before they not necessarily make a move on Joseph, but before they, put a price point to a guy like Linval Joseph. And then from Joseph's standpoint, like I said, at his age, although extremely effective, he no longer needs to prove anything in anybody's, OTAs, mini camp, or even training camp. So those are going to be guys that I feel could still be available for you midway through training camp. So if you're going to make a decision, then they are waiting for you.
All right, let's get to question number 2. And this one, I've got a long, detailed answer, so I'll let you go first. And this comes from the same guy on Twitter. He says, question number 2, do you believe Mike McCarthy can improve his play calling skills during high-pressure situations in 2024, Pat?
Absolutely. And the reason I say that is because I want everyone to keep in mind, and I actually, shameless plug, I penned a piece about this in the training camp, the Dallas Cowboys training camp magazine that'll be published here in the next week or two. It's the Science Lab feature, actually. It's what can the Cowboys offense look like in year 2 under Mike McCarthy? And I stress that it's year 2. So in year 1 of Mike McCarthy taking over play calling duties for the Dallas Cowboys, what did you get? You got CeeDee Lamb breaking records, several of them. Gloves being sent to the, to Canton, to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You got Dak Prescott, his very first All-Pro nod. You got him ending as runner-up for NFL MVP behind only Lamar Jackson. You did all of this. You finally got Brandon Cooks involved, and you started to see that transpire over the course of the second half of the season. You see Jalen Tolbert taking strides. You saw an undrafted or former seventh-round pick in Jalen Brooks come in when he got his opportunity and immediately make impact. So all of this was happening. The number 1 offense in the league, NFL MVP runner-up and All-Pro in the quarterback, another All-Pro nod for your wide receiver 1 who also set records thanks to the offense and your all-pro quarterback. And you mean to tell me you did all of this your first go-around with a shaky offensive line and virtually no run game? Now, you toss in, and we'll see where it goes as far as how quickly Tyler Guyton can be plopped in at left tackle. Infinite confidence in him because of his work ethic and definitely his size. He has the mindset, he has the work ethic, he has the size. I think it'll be more than okay. Cooper Beebe, I think, is more ready to take over that center role. But you upgrade your offensive line, and you, even though people don't believe that it's an upgrade in bringing Zeke back, it's an upgrade over not having Zeke.
At the very least, in the red zone,
Right.
On the goal line.
That's what I mean. It's an upgrade over not having Zeke, and that's how people need to view it. So if you even look at it as a remote stability upgrade at running back and an upgrade at the offensive line and another year under McCarthy's system, which when I talked to Dak about it, I talked to Brandon Cooks about it. And the question I asked them was, and I even asked Mike McCarthy about it in the press conference and in the walk-off, I said, hey, where are you guys at now versus this time last year? And he said, well, all three of them said the same thing. They said, but this time last year is all about heavy install.
I remember that.
How do we want to, we kept the language, most of the language from Kellen Moore's playbook, but we had to install how I wanted to run it. Dak Prescott, Brandon Cooks, they mirrored that by basically saying, oh, well, we're not really doing installs right now as much as we're just doing game review, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's comfortable, it's muscle memory, and now everybody really knows what their role is in this offense. And then, again, you could argue that you want a better upgrade to the running back room than Zeke, but guess what? Zeke comes back knowing the playbook for the most part, knowing the tendencies of the quarterback, knowing how to run behind Zach Martin and Terrence Steele. So there's familiarity there. So I say all of that in a long-winded way to say there's no reason why this offense shouldn't take another step forward in year two under Mike McCarthy. There's too much evidence to point to that fact.
All great, a great analysis there, and I do think it can take a step forward. Where I'm gonna focus on though is our guy saying the higher pressure situations, and I'm going to just assume he means like playoffs, right? Because you can have high pressure games during the regular season.
I thought he was talking situational football. Okay, we're talking the actual.
I think
post versus regular.
That's actually that you can say high pressure situational too. You can absolutely do that. And the reason why I'm just trying to cheat in here because during the regular season, it seems like McCarthy is into this kind of phase, right? Hey, we're in the first trimester, right? So we're in week 5, week 6. We're not rolling out everything. So you'll get into a situation where you play San Fran in week 5, but you're not rolling out everything. So it's hard to really judge you. So I'm just going to take all of 2024 and say, all right, you did what you did. Let's get to the playoffs. Can you be better there? And that's where my mind started thinking he can be better if the preparation improves, because I feel like it's a fair question. It's fair to question, I should say, this team under Mike McCarthy and its preparation in the 3 playoff losses. Follow me. That first year, you remember 2021, he admitted this team was feeling nervous. He was trying to get them going. Meanwhile, San Francisco's coming out the gremlin, with the boombox and Kodak Black. They had no nerves. And that's probably because they felt confident in their preparation. And what goes on to happen in those high-pressure moments, the Cowboys can't get it done, even though it was a close game. Go to the second year, 2022. The preparation actually looked good in the wild card round. And not because they got out to a fast start, Pat, but because they were able to overcome that slow start. Remember, it was 2 3-and-outs to start that game, and they put on a rout with 3 straight touchdowns. They had some counters to what was going on the other side of the ball. They did play Tampa Bay earlier in that year, so I felt like they were more confident in their preparation. Then what happens the next week? They go into San Francisco, clearly not confident playing that team. They come out slow. They deal with more adversity, losing their running back. They have no counter to it. And the same thing from 2021 essentially happens. And then finally, fast forward to the Packers game, the first one under Mike McCarthy calling plays, and you saw almost immediately they were out of sorts. The head coach is on the sideline throwing a hissy fit. You're going to your receiver needs counseling, your quarterback and your receiver are on the same. Everything was off, and I felt like because they were not prepared. So I say all that to say, if they are better prepared, I think the flow and the play calling during these high-pressure situations yeah, he'll be better. If not, it'll be the same old same, Pat.
And you know what? I don't disagree, and I'll add on one point to that. If you look at the McCarthy's return to Green Bay, okay, after that game, even though that's the game the Cowboys could have won, even though they ended up losing another starting cornerback, had already lost Jordan Lewis, Kelvin Joseph gets absolutely cooked because, hey, you know the vibes.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at after the game, allowing Aaron Rodgers to mount that comeback, days after, when Mike McCarthy calmed down, he admitted that he might have put too much pressure on that particular game and too much of the mentality on trying to win that one for coach. We got to have it. We got to have it. We got to have it instead of playing more loosely. I think that is something that permeates some of the ones that you're talking about, be it, going out to San Francisco, be it the Green Bay Packers coming to AT&T Stadium where it's just like, oh, well, we're supposed to beat them. So there's anxiety about messing up because the last time they were here, and then look what happened in San Francisco. So I think it goes to not necessarily physical preparation. I think the physical preparation is absolutely there. You see that time and again. But when it comes to the high-pressure situations, I think it's a mentality thing. And I think McCarthy, and he's shown signs of self-awareness in this capacity, he needs to understand that how you approach the game mentally as a head coach is how your players are going to approach the game mentally as a head coach. And then when it comes to schematics, the slow starts just simply cannot happen.
Yeah.
And now they would have been forgivable, and the Cowboys could have still won the game in January against the Packers if Dan Quinn's defense doesn't wet the bed, just absolutely wet the bed and then rolled around in their own urine. Now that combined with a slow start from your offense, which finally did get going, to McCarthy's credit. But you can't have both things happening, right? You can't have your defense just, making a mess of things and then your offense can't counterpunch. So for Mike McCarthy's offense, which is what we're speaking about, we'll see how Mike Zimmer's defense looks in Dallas. But for Mike McCarthy's offense, if we're talking playoff versus regular season, if we're talking about certain types of high-pressure situations wherein, the physical prep has been great all week, but the mental is where you get let down in the first 2 or 3 series, that does need to improve, but I do believe it can improve. But will it improve? We'll find out.
Hey, you touched on there briefly the defensive side. I know we're talking about McCarthy, and I understand that was the question, but they weren't prepared mentally or X's and O's wise on that other side of the ball.
Not at all.
No, and you heard Micah bring it up. You heard Wanye Thomas say, man, once I think it was the first possession after the penalty or what have you, and they went down and scored when they got off to a decent start. And Wanye's like, man, we felt like they had an answer to everything we were doing. They were mentally not exhausted, but they just felt like they had nothing that they could, respond with. And that clearly showed because those guys were all out of sorts. So I know we're talking offense, but they weren't even prepared defensively. So you can't be not prepared on both sides of the ball mentally and from an X and O standpoint and expect to come away with a victory. Can't do it.
That's our point. And, as much good as Dan Quinn did prior to that game in his career with the Cowboys, that game, it was just not it. It was obviously the worst showing, not only from most of his players, but, it starts at the top. And the Cowboys defense just was ill-prepared to counter, punch, and counteract things that the Packers had figured out and Matt LaFleur had figured out. And, unfortunately, it resulted in just touchdown after touchdown after touchdown. And it's just like, what can you do at that point? It was just deflating morally. And me sitting in the press box, I was sitting there in real time feeling the air get sucked out of the roof of that stadium. Now, when you flip the page and you look at Mike Zimmer, you look at those two styles of scheme and schematic, Dan Quinn, while he was able to get creative, and you talk about Micah playing zero tech sometimes and things like that, didn't do a ton of disguises. And that made it more, not easy, but easier for opposing offenses to kind of figure things out if they really dove into the film, as Matt LaFleur did, keeping in mind that Matt LaFleur is an offensive coach, right? He's an offensive-minded coach, so he knows how to dissect defense. And now you have a guy like Matt LaFleur and some of the other offensive-minded coaches in the league going up against Mike Zimmer, who is not only proven at the NFL level, has a Super Bowl ring with the Cowboys as a D coordinator, et cetera, et cetera. You have to look at the fact that he's the OG of the blitz bluff, right? Are they coming or are they dropping
Simulated
back?
pressure,
Back? Yeah, simulated pressure. You can't really figure it out, and because you can't really figure it out, it makes it that much more difficult for you to stick with your called play and not, get anxious and audible out of it or hot route out of it. It's designed to make you uncomfortable. And in Zimmer, and that's where I think the Cowboys will benefit defensively going forward, in addition to the fact that Zimmer absolutely demands his linebackers and his defensive linemen, more specifically his defensive tackles, to play at a high level. So, that's something that we'll see how it impacts the Cowboys going forward. I believe it'll impact them positively, but you're talking about mental preparation. We were talking about it, McCarthy, on the offensive side of the ball. On the defensive side of the ball, I have virtually zero concerns about Mike Zimmer having his defense mentally prepared for high-pressure situations. Now, what they do execution-wise or don't do execution-wise, that's on the individual player. But as far as preparation goes, you are hard-pressed to find many that are better in the NFL or at any level in football than Mike Zimmer as far as getting your guys mentally ready to go kick some ass.
To continue this sidebar conversation about Zim, we were looking at some film the other day for how he counters teams in disguise, and he uses his safeties often, and that's just something that Dan didn't do, right? You talked about disguising, but he didn't use his safeties to disguise. He didn't use his linebackers to disguise.
Right.
And, if you go look at Mike Zimmer's time in Minnesota, these things worked particularly against this style of offense. And I'm talking about the McVays of the world, the LaFleurs of the world. The reason why they can come out and be so confident is because, like you said, if the safety is going to be here the whole time, that's why you see Jordan Love go to line of scrimmage, audible, and get into a better play. That's why I'm a LaFleur, and you hear Jones say, "Hey man, these dudes is front runners. We're not scared of this defense because we know that they're going to be in this specific spot and they're going to call these, quote, same three type of plays. And if something does go awry, unfortunately, Dan Quinn's in the booth. He can't do anything on the sideline. Mike Zimmer is going to be on that sideline to correct anything on the sideline. Anything that goes down, he's going to try to have a counter because those guys are going to be reporting back to him. So I really do look forward to the cat and mouse game that goes on with Zim.
And you bring up an excellent point when it comes to booth versus the sideline. And there are pros and cons to both. Obviously, booth, con, you're not in the thick of it. You can't just pull a player to the side and coach in real time that particular player and talk to a particular position group about what you're seeing in real time because everything has to come through the headphones from the booth. But then the pro of being in the booth is you get the bird's eye view. You get the all-22 view. The real-life version of the all-22 view. So there's the pro. But Mike Zimmer doesn't care about that. Mike Zimmer wants to be on the sideline, and he was asked about it, and he said it specifically. He said, I want to be able to congratulate guys when they come off the field for making an excellent play, and I want to be able to get at guys more or less when they're not doing the right thing. And that type of energy is lost when, okay, let's say Mike Zimmer's in the booth and player X doesn't run the right coverage route for a particular play, or doesn't run through the receiver's break or something like that and cost the Cowboys what could have been a potential takeaway. Well, there's a different type of energy from when your mom calls you from work and tells you that you're in trouble versus you getting home and she's right there at the front door waiting to give you that smoke. Mike Zimmer is going to be at the front door when you get home from school waiting to give you that smoke. He's not calling you from work, giving you a warning, telling you that, oh, well, when I get home, you're in trouble. No. When you come off that field, you're already home. He's right there waiting for you. So I think that's a massive dynamic change that will work in favor for the Cowboys, and I'm actually glad you brought that up.
I'm laughing because I'm thinking about the times when that literally happened.
You know how that feels because, flashback. That's what I'm saying. That's why you laughing.
I'm thinking about the times, man, where I had to pretend I was asleep, when my mom got home so I don't get that ass whooping. But man,
and you still got that belt, though. You still got that belt. Got woke up with it. Trust me, people, different times, we caught them hands.
Boy, did we.
So I had a PTSD moment myself.
Hands and whatever else was around them.
Yeah, hands, belt, switch, and if you're in the South, you know what a switch is. So, I'm going to leave it like that. Well, actually, statute of limitations is gone. So, love you, mama, they can't do nothing to you now. But it obviously worked. I'm here. I'm talking to Steele. I'm on Scientific Method. People listening. So, that ass whooping actually, it worked.
It worked for us. Let's get to question number 3. This comes from AA Ron. It's on Twitter, but he's often here in the chat. Shouts out to him. He says, scenario for if Dak leaves, D-Law and Martin also aren't here for 2025, assuming they don't resign. CD and Micah, he says, are quiet, non-vocal leaders. His question, who becomes the vocal leader on the Cowboys, and is it a problem?
As we have this conversation, I could see it being a concern. And when you shot me this question in the rundown, I really had to pause and think for a second. And the fact that I had to pause and think for a second does not sit well with me because no name immediately popped up in my head. Now, eventually a name did, and when it popped up in my head, I was like, that's the one. But it shouldn't have taken that long for me to cycle through the roster and see who it is. But I think it actually is two names because another one just popped up as we're having this conversation. The first one is Tyler Smith.
No.
I think Tyler Smith is 100% that guy. I think Tyler Smith is 100% the guy who's going to be willing to challenge the entirety of the locker room to be better on a week-to-week basis, to make sure they're putting the right effort forward and the best foot forward in practices and things like that. And he's only going to be more emboldened by his continued level of high play because that gives him the credibility to be able to challenge guys like that. The other name is going to be, for me, DeMarvion Overshown. Overshown doesn't quite have any. Yeah, he doesn't have any stripes just yet because he was redshirted last year. But I watch Overshown in the locker room. I watch how he moves. I watch Overshown on the practice field. I watch how he moves. I watch him in the building. I watch how he moves. This is not only and Longhorns fans can attest to this, as fun-loving as Overshown is, at the same time, he is very vocal. He is very, very in tune with what his defense is doing and helping guys get in the right spots. So I think that between Tyler Smith and DeMarvion Overshown, once Overshown starts getting those stripes under his belt, as far as like reps and making plays and potential Pro Bowls and things like that, I think those are going to be your two guys, one on offense, one on defense, that kind of have to step up in the unlikely event that you're without Dak Prescott, and then in the post-Demarcus Lawrence era, things like that. So those are going to be my top two guys as we have this conversation.
That's uncanny, man. Those are the same exact two names I have here, and DeMarvion Overshown was number one. That was the first one that popped up because I remember his rookie year. I said this to myself, and you were around him a lot more than me, but I saw him at camp, right, and then I saw him kind of galvanize the entire unit before a preseason game. I'm like, this is a rookie. And he had, I think Dak was looking at him. He had veterans looking at him. And obviously, they probably let the rookie do that, before that game because it's preseason or whatnot. And then I had a chance to speak with him briefly and just kind of, he has an aura about him. I often say this about Demo. I often say, hey, man, whatever it is that they decide to do with him, whatever challenge is presented to him, I feel like he'll figure it out because he just has that aura about him. So for me, is Demo. And when you talk about, replacing Zach Martin, I had the same thing here. Tyler Smith. I feel like Tyler is a bit more vocal. He's not afraid to speak out in the media as well. But I'm going to take this answer or this question and layer it a little bit here. He said, Micah and CD are non-vocal leaders. When you listen to them two talk earlier in the offseason, they talked about actually being more vocal during game day. Now, I can't really see CD breaking out of that just quite yet, but I do think it'll be interesting to keep our eye on Micah during the game because there's leadership Monday through Saturday, which that's Dak and D-Law and Zach Martin. Then there's game day vocal leadership. I don't really look at Dak, D-Law, and Zach Martin as game day vocal rah-rah type guys. I don't see that. But Micah brought up, hey, there needs to be someone that when the going gets tough, raises the spirit of the team. I don't think you're going to see Micah be a leader Monday through Sunday. Not yet. He's still very young and very, I don't want to use the term immature, but he's 24, 25 years old, right? He's still immature in that sense. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he's quite there yet. But when he brought up the whole leadership, it was about being vocal on game day when things get rough. Because think about it. Who is that guy? You would say it was J-Ron, but J-Ron didn't play good last year. So it was really hard to be like,
Right.
yeah, let's follow a guy who arguably is the third or fourth best safety right now on the team. So I just say that to say, let's keep an eye on Micah Parsons during the game and see if he can become that this year. If not this year, hopefully sooner rather than later.
I think when it comes to Micah, everybody needs to get out of their head the expectation that he's going to be a vocal leader in the locker room or on the practice field. He's going to lead by example as far as production is concerned. When it comes to in-game situations, I'm right there with you in wondering, what level of frustration will it take for Micah to start barking at guys, okay, as opposed to kind of shutting down and internalizing and actually getting in guys' faces and pulling a Leighton Vander Esch, for example, pulling a Sean Lee, for example. But until we see that from Micah, we haven't seen it from Micah. But we have seen, even if it's just through the collegiate career of Demo and then combine that with what I've been seeing with him demeanor-wise in practices and things like that, training camp last year, for those that were out there at training camp, his preseason games before he went down against the Seahawks with the torn ACL, Demo has that Sean Lee gene. He has that Leighton Vander Esch gene where it's like, listen, as a defense, this is not acceptable. The standard is the standard, and we need to play up to the standard. And I believe that defensively, and that's fine with me with it coming from a linebacker because that's the heart of your defense. So if it comes from the heart of the defense, I would love for it to come from other places as well. I would love for it to come from, the defensive end in the post-Demarcus Lawrence era, whenever that might happen. I would love for it to come from Sam Williams once he gets, those particular stripes. And I believe that in a couple years, we'll be having this conversation about seeing Marshawn kneeling because don't let that smile fool you. He's going to let some guys know when they're not in the right place or doing the right thing, but not quite yet. But I don't think the not quite yet applies to DeMarvion Overshow, and I think he's going to go out there, play some high-quality football, and maybe as early as the back end of this season, you'll see him constructively challenging maybe some veterans and saying, hey, let's try this or let's try that. So I think Demo for defense and Tyler Smith for offense.
I agree with what you said there quickly, and we'll move on. Linebacker and or safety really should be the leader of the defense, specifically vocally, because those are the guys that either A, are the green dot, or they're the ones putting guys in position. Hardly ever do you see a defensive lineman as your overall vocal leader / green dot guy. That's just not normal because those guys literally can't see behind them. They aren't getting guys set. They aren't the ones directing things. They aren't the quarterbacks of the defense. So I would love for it to be Demo. If not, maybe one of the safety guys. But from on the position, say D-Law in the room, yeah, he's that guy right now because he's the veteran. But when he leaves, I think that's where Mike will have to pick up that mantle. Final question.
And I'll add this really quickly.
Sorry.
I'll add this real quick before we get to the final question. I know that question was for 25 and beyond, but for 24, draw a circle around Eric Kendricks because he is not kidding around. And I'll leave it at that. He is not kidding around.
and I think guys should absolutely be everyone, not every single, even D-Law, including him, should be following him because he knows his defense at the back of his hand. He's been around. He's been to the top as one of the best players in the league. So I will 100% be getting behind number 50. Final question. From Cowboys 46. He says the 2023 draft class was a disappointment, but who do you think has the best chance to break out as an impact player in year 2?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. We do the segue thing kind of well, right? The answer is the DeMarvion Overshown.
Hey, here we go.
That's the answer. If DeMarvion Overshown doesn't go down with that torn ACL, he's not only probably one of the better players on the Cowboys defense last year, but far and away he's the best player in that 2023 draft class. Redshirted, unfortunately, but he used that opportunity while he was rehabbing his knee to put on the right amount of muscle mass. He's bigger. That means he can be more physical. But based on what I've seen in OTAs and minicamp, he has not lost any speed, has not lost any quickness. His football instinct is absolutely still as high as it ever was. So he mentioned that it might have been a blessing in disguise because he used that injury to build up his upper body even more. So maybe so. That being said, all signs point to as long as DeMarvion Overshown can avoid suffering any setbacks, and he's been doing fantastic, by the way. He is on track to participate in training camp, potentially all of training camp, but we'll see if he escapes the PUP list first. But once he gets through that rookie learning curve, because for him it will be a rookie learning curve at one of the harder positions to play in the league, but he gets to learn it behind and alongside a guy like Eric Kendricks. He gets to get information and knowledge and mentorship from a guy like Damone Clark. And maybe even Damian Wilson. Again, we don't know that Damian Wilson is going to make the team. However, his experience and being able to impart that upon a guy like Demarion Overshown is going to be priceless and invaluable. So for me, looking down the list, Schoonmaker he's dealing with another injury now, right, with the hamstring. His body is not, playing nice, for lack of a better way to say it, in his first couple of seasons to start with the Cowboys. Junior Fehoko, we don't know what's there because he didn't earn a single snap in year one. And the list goes down from there. Eric Scott, Cowboys traded up to get him. He looks great, looks ready, but he's going to have to compete in a big way. I don't know that he's necessarily head-to-head with Kalen Carson because Eric Scott's going to be rotational behind Jordan Lewis. Kalen Carson, though he can play all three positions at cornerback, he's a boundary guy to start and until further notice, per my eyes and per Al Harris. So Eric Scott, what do you have there? You don't know yet. So the list goes on as far as we don't know. And then you have Demarion Overshown where it's like, oh, we know, we're just waiting. And this will likely be it.
100. I'm going to touch on that a little bit with the chat here as we let you go to get on with your busy day, man. Appreciate you as always coming through for the scientific method, big bro. And we'll talk to you next week.
Yes, sir. Fun as always, man. Beware Mom Dukes at the front door.
Indeed.